Some secrets refuse to stay buried. They fester in the dark, unseen, in quiet towns under normal lives. Unsolved cases grow colder with time, files gather layers of dust, but the stories, they don't always end there. Sometimes the silence itself seems to scream, a desperate, unheard cry for notice, waiting patiently for someone, anyone, to listen, a chilling echo in the stillness. Our story unfolds in such a place, where shadows cling a little tighter, and the fog hangs heavy in the deep woods. Old houses stand as silent, weary witnesses. The wind whispers forgotten names through the trees. Here, the veil between known worlds feels thin, almost transparent, disturbingly so. The past is never truly past. It breathes. It waits, with an unnerving patience. The dead, they sometimes say, walk again, not merely in chilling tales told by fireside, but in the desperate, raw moments of truth, seeking a justice denied to them in life, seeking a voice to speak their final piece, a final, urgent message from the other side, from beyond the cold, unyielding embrace of the grave. Imagine that for a moment if you can. A witness who cannot be called to any stand, a victim pointing a spectral finger at their killer. This is a journey into that chilling unknown, where stark logic collides with the inexplicable, where the most rational mind strains to comprehend. We delve deeply into one such disturbing case, a single, terrifying and unbelievable claim, a ghost's confession to its own brutal murder. It will undoubtedly test your every belief, and perhaps it will make you wonder aloud, what truly waits for us in the encroaching shadows. Claire McAllister lived an ordinary life. Nothing about her suggested a brush with darkness. She was in many ways like any of us. Unassuming, quietly grounded in her daily routines, completely, utterly unprepared for the terror that awaited her when night fell. Her life was a tapestry of quiet normalcy, a predictable rhythm day in and day out, until one night that rhythm was shattered. The ordinary became the terrifying. Before the event, her existence was peaceful, filled with simple comforts, devoid of high drama. There was an absolute absence of the supernatural. No ghostly encounters in her past experiences. She wasn't a fervent believer in restless spirits, not particularly, not in any serious manner. She had her work, her circle of friends, her quiet evenings. Nothing in her history hinted at what was to come, no indication she would become a reluctant conduit, a messenger for the tragically departed. Then came the night that changed everything, a profound shift from the mundane to the terrifying, the precise moment when the ordinary fabric shattered, torn asunder by something ancient and cold, a specific date, a specific unholy hour, when everything she knew was irrevocably altered. The very air in her room grew colder, a palpable presence, uninvited and unwelcome. It began subtly, a creeping sense of unease, a silent prelude to an unimaginable horror. The dread began to build before the full encounter, that unmistakable, chilling feeling of being watched, the subtle, almost imperceptible signs, signals that something was terribly, deeply wrong, a creeping fear before the full manifestation. It was not a dream, she would later insist, though she would desperately wish it had been. It was a stark, chilling, undeniable reality, a reality that began with a whispered word, a presence materializing in the darkest hour. The core of this mystery is the confession, a voice speaking from the silent void, a message delivered not by human lips but by something else entirely, something unknown. Imagine the sheer paralyzing terror of that moment, the overwhelming instant disbelief that would follow. A secret so dark, so deeply buried. It had to cross the ultimate boundary to be revealed. The whispered words that would forever change Claire's life, and astonishingly, help solve a brutal crime. The nature of this confession was horrifyingly clear. It spoke of murder, a life violently taken. It named a victim, and it named a killer, a desperate, chilling plea for earthly justice. The impossible clarity of the information given, this was no vague feeling, no shadowy glimpse, it was specific, detailed, and unwavering. A direct accusation from the one who knew, a story of betrayal and sudden watery death, whispered by the victim herself, a voice from beyond. This unearthly event raises profound questions. How could such a thing possibly be true? Was Claire McAllister caught in a vivid dream? Or more worrisomely, was she losing her mind? Or did she, against all odds, truly receive a visitor? A spirit returned, seeking to expose its killer. The questions are immediate, deeply unsettling. The implications are nothing short of staggering. This is the very heart of our chilling story. A confession delivered from beyond the grave. And so, our investigation must begin here. Following such an incredible, ghostly claim, we will navigate the inevitable skepticism, the painstaking search for tangible truth, the cautious exploration of the unexplainable. We will delve into this most chilling tale, examining every strange detail, every possibility, from the grounded earthly police investigation to the myriad theories of the paranormal that might, just might, shed light on this darkness. It was November, the year 2017. A chill had settled deep into the bones of the night. Claire McAllister was asleep in her bed, or she had been until a moment ago. Her eyes snapped open, wide, staring. The clock on her nightstand pulsed a cold digital red. 3:17 a.m. The dead of night. An hour when the world felt utterly still. But something in her room was not still. Something was terribly, undeniably wrong. A profound coldness had invaded the space. Not the ordinary chill of a late autumn night. This was a damp, penetrating cold. It seemed to emanate from a single point, growing, spreading like an icy stain. The air grew heavy, thick with unseen dread. Her breath hitched in her throat, a silent gasp. She strained her ears, listening intently, but there was no sound, only an oppressive silence. A silence that screamed louder than any noise. Then, she saw it, or rather, her, standing at the very edge of her bed. A figure unmistakably female took shape, materializing out of the oppressive gloom. It was indistinct at first, a wavering shadow, then with horrifying clarity details sharpened. The form solidified, becoming terrifyingly real. Claire lay frozen, unable to move, unable to scream. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. This was no dream. This was no nightmare. The woman was soaking wet. Water dripped from her hair, her clothes, forming small dark puddles on the bedroom carpet. Her eyes were wide, impossibly wide, staring directly at Claire, filled with an unspeakable fear, a silent terror that seemed to plead for help. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the dim light. She didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, a dripping beacon of sorrow, an apparition of pure, unadulterated horror. The silence in the room stretched taut. Seconds felt like an eternity. Claire could only stare, paralyzed by the sight, the dripping figure, the wide, terrified eyes. Then, the apparition's lips moved, almost imperceptibly. A sound, softer than a sigh, broke the stillness. It was a whisper, dry and rasping, like leaves skittering across a forgotten tombstone. A voice that seemed to carry the chill of the grave itself. Words formed, chillingly clear in the oppressive air. "He drowned me," the ghost whispered. The words hung there, heavy and damning. Each syllable was an icy shard against Claire's skin. The figure's gaze never left hers, intense and urgent. "My name is Emily," the voice continued, frail but insistent. Emily, a name, a person, a life extinguished. The ghost was identifying herself, offering a clue. A desperate attempt to bridge the void, to make her story known, to break her silence, the confirmation of a life violently taken. Then came the most chilling part of the message, the accusation delivered with that same ghostly breath. Tell them it was Carter. Carter, another name, the alleged perpetrator. The ghost was not just a victim, she was a witness, pointing a spectral finger from beyond the veil. The plea was implicit but overwhelmingly powerful, a demand for justice, for truth to be revealed. Claire felt the weight of those words settle upon her, a terrible burden delivered by a messenger from death. And then, as suddenly as she had appeared, the figure began to fade, to dissipate. The edges of her form grew hazy, indistinct. The dripping sound ceased. The cold receded slightly. She simply vanished. No trace left behind. No lingering scent of dampness. No sound of departure. Only the phantom puddles that Claire knew were not really there. Claire was alone once more in her silent room. But the silence now throbbed with the ghost's words. "Emily Carter, he drowned me." Claire sat bolt upright in bed, trembling violently. Her heart thundered, a frantic drum against her ribs. The room was empty, quiet, ordinary once more. But the ordinariness felt like a cruel deception. Nothing felt ordinary anymore. Not after this. She fumbled for the lamp, her hand shaking. Light flooded the room, chasing away the deepest shadows, but it could not chase away the image seared into her mind. The dripping woman, the eyes wide with fear, the whispered words echoing, refusing to fade. Had it been real? The question clawed at her. A vivid dream? A hallucination born of stress? She pinched herself hard. The pain was sharp, real. The memory was too clear, too detailed, too terrifying. The cold, the dampness she had felt, the distinct raspy quality of the ghost's voice. Every detail was etched with horrifying precision. No, this was no mere product of her imagination. She had seen something. She had heard something. Something impossible yet undeniably present. The message itself. What was she to do with it? "He drowned me. My name is Emily. Tell them it was Carter." It was a confession, a murder accusation, delivered by the victim herself, or so it seemed. Who would ever believe such a story? She imagined telling the police, their skeptical faces. They would think she was mad or seeking attention. The fear of ridicule was immense, paralyzing. Yet the ghost's plea had been so desperate. The weight of the secret pressed down on her. It was a burden almost too heavy to bear. She felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The ghost, Emily, had chosen her. Why? Claire didn't know, she couldn't comprehend it, but the fear in those spectral eyes, the urgency in that voice, it was a cry for help she couldn't easily ignore. Sleep was impossible now, a distant memory. The night stretched before her, filled with the chilling echo. Emily's story, whispered from a watery grave. There are theories, of course, explanations, for those who dare to look beyond the mundane. One such theory speaks of crisis apparitions, a specific type of spiritual manifestation. It is said these spirits appear at a moment of extreme duress, often at the very instant of their death, or in the immediate, chaotic aftermath of trauma. Their appearance is a sudden, desperate cry, a final, fleeting connection to the world of the living, a last attempt to communicate a vital message. Could Emily's visitation have been such an event? A spirit ripped from life in profound emotional unrest, reaching out in her final moments of consciousness, or in the disorienting shock immediately following her demise. Crisis apparitions often appear to individuals, people with whom they have no prior connection, no familial ties, no shared history. Claire McAllister certainly fit that description, an ordinary woman chosen seemingly at random. A stranger to Emily, a stranger to Carter. The details of the encounter haunted Claire, the soaking wet clothes, a visceral link to drowning, the sheer terror etched on Emily's spectral face. These were not the hallmarks of a peaceful passing. They spoke of violence, of struggle, of a desperate end, consistent with a spirit in profound crisis. The message itself was stark, direct, urgent. Not a meandering tale, but a pointed accusation. A plea for intervention before the truth was lost, before her story was buried with her body. Claire wrestled with the chilling encounter. The names Emily and Carter were now branded in her mind. The vision was not fading with the morning light. Instead, it seemed to solidify, to demand action. The ghost theory, the crisis apparition, offered a framework, a way to perhaps understand the unexplainable. But understanding the theory was one thing. Knowing what to do with the information, with the terror, that was an entirely different and far more daunting prospect. The ghost's plea for justice now rested heavily on Claire's shoulders. The dawn that followed Claire McAllister's terrifying visitation brought no relief. only a cold, harsh light that illuminated the impossibility of her situation. The spectral words, "He drowned me. My name is Emily. Tell them it was Carter," replayed endlessly. A chilling loop of accusation from beyond the known world. She knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that she had to speak, to relay this message, no matter how insane it sounded. The weight of the ghost's terror, the urgency in that whispered plea. It was a burden she could not carry alone, a secret that demanded air. Ignoring it felt like a betrayal of that desperate spectral face, a pact made in the dead of night with a visitor from the grave. The decision to approach the authorities was fraught with immense trepidation. She imagined the incredulous stares, the thinly veiled pity, the outright dismissal. Who would believe that a ghost had confessed to its own murder? It sounded like the ravings of a disturbed mind, or worse, a cruel hoax. Yet the image of Emily, dripping and terrified, was too vivid to ignore. The responsibility to act, to pass on the names, prickled at her conscience. It was a fragile thread of hope for a soul seemingly trapped in torment. Claire rehearsed the words in her mind, each syllable feeling more absurd, but the fear in Emily's eyes was a more potent force than her own fear of ridicule. She had to try for Emily's sake, for the sake of justice. The police station was a stark, impersonal place of harsh lights and muted efficiency. It smelled of floor polish and old coffee, a bastion of earthly order, a stark contrast to the ethereal cold and dripping dread of her bedroom encounter. Claire clutched her purse, her knuckles white, her heart a frantic tempo. Each ticking second in the waiting area amplified her anxiety. She felt out of place, a purveyor of an unbelievable tale in a world of hard facts. How could she bridge the chasm between her experience and their reality? The officers moved with purpose, their conversations clipped and professional. None of them, she was certain, had ever dealt with a witness quite like her. A witness whose primary informant was, by all accounts, deceased. Finally, her turn came. She was led to a small, nondescript interview room. Facing a detective, she took a deep breath, the air tasting like ash. The words tumbled out, hesitant at first, then with a strange, desperate fluency. She recounted the visitation, the cold, the dripping figure, the names. Emily, Carter, drowned, the core of the ghost's chilling message. She watched the detective's face for any flicker of understanding, any sign of belief. But his expression remained carefully neutral, professionally inscrutable. She knew what he must be thinking, the labels he was likely applying, yet she had done what she felt she must. She had delivered the spectral confession. The rest, she supposed, was now out of her trembling hands. Detective Marcus Heller had seen his share of strange things in 20 years. He'd listened to rambling informants, wild accusations, and heartbreaking lies. The city's underbelly had a way of spitting out stories that defied easy categorization. He prided himself on his ability to sift fact from fiction, truth from delusion. Skepticism wasn't just a trait, it was a necessary shield in his line of work. He'd learned long ago that people's motives were rarely straightforward, and that the truth often hid beneath layers of confusion or outright deceit. So, when Claire McAllister sat before him, visibly shaken, telling her ghost story, his internal alarms, honed by years of experience, were already ringing softly. Another tale for the annals of the unusual, he initially surmised. He listened patiently, a practiced art for any seasoned investigator. His face betrayed little of his internal thoughts, a professional mask firmly in place. A woman at the foot of the bed, soaking wet, whispering names. Emily, Carter, a drowning. It had all the hallmarks of a vivid nightmare, or perhaps he considered a psychological episode, a cry for help manifesting strangely. He'd encountered individuals convinced of far more elaborate conspiracies. This, at first blush, seemed to fit a pattern of stress-induced fantasy. He made notes, methodically, capturing the key details of her account. The woman's fear seemed genuine, he'd give her that. Her distress was palpable. But genuine fear didn't automatically equate to a genuine supernatural event. Claire's narrative continued, her voice trembling but insistent on the details. The time, 3:17 a.m. the specific words spoken by the alleged apparition. Heller internally cataloged the elements. No physical evidence, a single witness. A witness claiming communication with a deceased, unnamed individual. It was the kind of report that usually ended up filed away, noted but not actively pursued. Unless, of course, there was some tangible, verifiable link to an existing case. He considered the possibility of a prank, though her demeanor didn't suggest it. Or perhaps she had overheard something, somewhere, and her subconscious had twisted it. The human mind was a complex, often unreliable narrator of its own experiences. He thanked Claire McAllister for her information, his tone carefully neutral. He assured her they would look into it, the standard, non-committal response. Internally, he was already moving on to the mountain of other cases demanding his attention. Cases with physical evidence, with credible witnesses, with solvable puzzles. A ghost story, however compellingly told, rarely climbed to the top of that pile, yet something about the specificity of the name she provided lingered. Emily Carter. It was a small detail, but sometimes small details mattered. He wouldn't actively investigate a ghost, but he might, just might, run the names. A quick search, just to close the loop, to satisfy a faint, nagging curiosity. Detective Heller returned to his desk, the scent of stale coffee hanging in the air. Claire McAllister's story, despite his ingrained skepticism, echoed faintly in his mind. The name she had mentioned, Emily and Carter, felt oddly specific, not common names one might pluck from thin air in a moment of fantasy. He decided more to dismiss the lingering thought than with any real expectation, to run them. A quick search through the missing persons database, a routine check. He typed Emily, knowing the results would be overwhelmingly broad. Hundreds of Emilys from all walks of life, for all manner of reasons. This felt like searching for a single raindrop in a torrential downpour, a needle in a haystack of human sorrow and unsolved disappearances. He then refined his search, adding the context Claire had provided, a drowning, though that was the alleged cause of death, relayed by an alleged ghost. Still, he cross-referenced missing persons with any cases involving bodies of water. Slowly, methodically, he sifted through the digital records. Then, a file from 2013 caught his eye. Missing person, Emily Rudd. The report stated she was last seen near Blackwood Lake 4 years prior. A shiver, unexpected and unwelcome, traced its way down Heller's spine. The details were sparse, as they often were in cold cases, but the location near a body of water resonated disturbingly with Claire's account. Emily Rudd. The name felt suddenly heavier, more substantial. He delved deeper into the cold case file, dust motes dancing in the single shaft of light. Emily Rudd, 24 years old at the time of her disappearance. Her family had reported her missing after she failed to return from an outing. Foul play had been suspected by the initial investigators, but evidence was scarce. The lake had been searched but yielded nothing conclusive at the time. Crucially, her name, Emily Rudd, had never been widely released to the public. The investigation had gone cold, another unsolved tragedy in the precinct's archives. Protecting the integrity of any future leads meant details were kept confidential. Only a handful of detectives would even recognize her name immediately. And then, Heller found the detail that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. Listed in the original report, as someone interviewed extensively at the time, someone who was known to be with Emily Rudd shortly before she vanished. Her boyfriend, Carter Bell. The information was buried deep within the file. It had never been part of any public appeal or press release. Detective Heller leaned back in his chair, the creak of the old springs loud in the quiet room. Claire McAllister. How could she possibly know these two specific names? How could she link Emily to Carter and to a drowning? This was no longer just a strange story, this was deeply unsettling. Section 4. Beyond Coincidence, the Theory of Intelligent Haunting. The connection was undeniable, a stark fact in a sea of inexplicable claims. Emily Rudd, missing. Carter Bell, her boyfriend. Information not public. Detective Heller stared at the old file, then at his notes from Claire's interview. His practiced skepticism was now battling a profound sense of unease. This wasn't just a lucky guess or a vague premonition on Claire's part. The precision of the information was too sharp, too accurate to dismiss lightly. He replayed her fearful testimony in his mind, her genuine terror. Could there be something more to her story than he had initially allowed himself to believe? The rational explanations, hoax, delusion, overheard conversation felt suddenly inadequate. They failed to account for the specificity of these deeply buried details. If Claire McAllister wasn't lying, and if she wasn't clinically delusional, what then? How could she possess knowledge that was confined to old police files and grieving families? This was the point where the ordinary boundaries of investigation began to fray. Where the rulebook he had followed for 2 decades offered no clear guidance. It was in this uncomfortable space that other, less conventional theories emerged. Theories that resided in the shadowy realm of the paranormal. Explanations that most police officers would scoff at least openly. But the facts as they were now presenting themselves were undeniably strange. He was a man of logic, but this case was pushing the limits of that logic. One such paranormal theory is known as an intelligent haunting. This concept proposes that some spiritual entities are not mere echoes of the past. Unlike residual hauntings, which are like psychic recordings replaying an event, an intelligent haunting involves a conscious, aware presence, a discarnate mind. This spirit actively interacts with its environment and with living individuals. It can communicate, often with a clear purpose or a message to convey. These entities are thought to retain aspects of their personality and memories from life. They might be seeking resolution, justice, or simply to make their presence known. The communication can be direct, as Claire described, or more subtle. Could the spirit of Emily Rudd, if such a thing were possible, be such an entity? An intelligent presence, aware of her fate, and desperate to see justice served? Actively choosing to communicate the names of her killer and herself to a stranger? The idea was profoundly unsettling, challenging Heller's entire worldview. Yet it offered a framework, however outlandish, that could accommodate Claire's testimony. A testimony now eerily corroborated by the cold, hard facts in Emily Rudd's file. The how of such a communication remained a staggering mystery, but the what, the names, the implied crime, was becoming alarmingly clear. Detective Heller knew his investigation had just taken a deeply troubling, unexpected turn. Section 1. The Ghost's Map, A Journey into Dread. Detective Heller faced a disturbing reality. The names matched: Emily Rudd, Carter Bell. Claire McAllister's vision, however outlandish, now held an undeniable weight. It was no longer just a story, it was a lead from a source beyond any he'd encountered. He pressed Claire for more details, any detail. About the place Emily's spirit seemed to indicate, about the sensations, the images, the feelings. He needed something concrete, something to guide a physical search, something more than just names whispered by a ghost. Claire spoke of a lake, dark and forbidding. She described a specific gnarled tree nearby. Its branches twisted like arthritic fingers clawing at the sky. She mentioned a flash of rusted metal, perhaps a canoe, left abandoned, decaying by the water's edge. And then, the most disturbing sensation of all, the overwhelming, terrifying feeling of drowning. A cold, suffocating pressure, water filling her lungs. It was Emily's final, horrifying experience, she felt, imprinted on her, a psychic scar from the spectral encounter. Heller listened, his skepticism warring with a grim necessity. Her descriptions, though born of an apparent vision, were specific. Blackwood Lake. It had been searched before, years ago. But perhaps not with these particular landmarks in mind. Could these details, relayed by a terrified woman, lead them to Emily? The thought was both preposterous and chillingly plausible. He had to make a decision, a difficult one, to commit resources based on such an unbelievable claim. The potential for ridicule was high, the chances of success slim. Yet the names were undeniably real. He assembled a small, discreet team. No grand announcements, no sensationalism, just a quiet return to the shores of Blackwood Lake, based on a dead woman's apparent directions. Claire would not accompany them. The experience was too raw for her. but her words, her descriptions, formed their unsettling map. The air was thick with unspoken questions, with palpable tension. Were they chasing a phantom, indulging a fantasy, or were they on the verge of unearthing a long-buried secret, a secret that a restless spirit was desperate to reveal? The journey into the woods felt like a step into the unknown. Section 2. Whispers in the Wilderness. The search renewed. Blackwood Lake lay still and silent, its surface like dark glass. Detective Heller and his team began their search, methodical yet tense. They had combed these shores before, after Emily Rudd first vanished. Years ago, the initial investigation had yielded nothing substantial. Now, they returned, guided by Claire's strange, spectral clues. Searching for a specific twisted tree, a rusted canoe, landmarks delivered by a voice from beyond the grave. The team fanned out, their eyes scanning the tangled undergrowth. The air was heavy, the silence broken only by the crunch of their boots. Hours passed, the search painstaking and seemingly fruitless. Doubt began to creep in, a cold companion to their efforts. Was this a wild goose chase, a fool's errand? Heller fought against the rising tide of skepticism within him. He focused on Claire's conviction, the terror in her voice. Then, a breakthrough. One of the officers called out, "Detective! Over here! I think you'll want to see this." There, half hidden by overgrown ferns and bushes, exactly as Claire had described, was a tree. Its branches were gnarled, contorted into unnatural shapes. Nearby, further towards the murky waterline, another discovery, a rusted canoe, overturned and decaying. The details matched with an unnerving precision. The area around the twisted tree and rusted canoe became their focus. Claire had spoken of a sensation, a feeling tied to this place. Heller ordered his team to search the ground meticulously, looking for any disturbance. The soil here was soft, damp from proximity to the lake, covered in a thick layer of fallen leaves and forest debris. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sounded unnaturally loud. One officer, probing the earth near the tree's gnarled roots, paused. His shovel met something less yielding than compacted soil. He called Heller over, his voice low and strained. Carefully they began to clear away the topsoil. The digging was slow, deliberate, almost reverent. The faint, unmistakable odor of decay began to rise from the earth. Then, they saw it, the first sign. A fragment of cloth preserved by the damp earth, followed by the unmistakable, horrifying outline of human bones. A shallow grave, hastily dug, poorly concealed, hidden for years beneath the twisted roots of the ancient tree. The skeletal remains were carefully, respectfully exposed. Emily Rudd, lost for 4 years, had finally been found. Beside the remains, nestled in the dark soil, something glinted, a silver bracelet delicate and tarnished with time. Engraved on its surface, clear despite the years of burial, was a single elegant letter, E. The discovery of Emily Rudd's remains sent a shockwave through the investigation, and through Detective Heller's carefully constructed worldview. Claire McAllister's vision, her spectral encounter, had been horrifyingly accurate. From the names of the victim and the alleged killer, to the precise location of the body, marked by specific, eerie landmarks. How could she have known these things? The rational explanations he had clung to now seemed utterly insufficient. Coincidence was stretched far beyond the breaking point. He was left confronting the deeply unsettling possibility that something truly paranormal had occurred. This is where some paranormal researchers might introduce a theory known as psychometry or token object reading. It's the belief that objects and places can absorb energy, that they can retain impressions from people and events, especially events charged with intense emotion like violence or trauma. These energetic imprints, these psychic echoes, can linger for years, latent, waiting for someone sensitive enough to perceive them, a kind of psychic fingerprint left on the material world. Could Claire McAllister possess such a sensitivity? Was her terrifying vision of Emily a result of psychometry? The sensation of drowning she described, the specific visual details, the twisted tree, the rusted canoe, were these psychometric impressions? The silver bracelet engraved with E lay heavy in an evidence bag. For investigators, it was a crucial piece of physical evidence. The tragic truth of Emily Rudd's fate had been unearthed. Carter Bell sat across from Detective Heller, a mask of cool composure. He had been brought in for questioning, a routine he likely anticipated. 4 years had passed since Emily Rudd vanished into the cold autumn air. He answered questions with a practiced ease, a subtle, almost imperceptible smirk. He knew nothing, he claimed, about Emily's whereabouts, her tragic fate, just the grieving boyfriend, left behind with unanswered questions. Or so he portrayed himself, a picture of concerned bewilderment. But Heller knew, with a chilling certainty, that the script was about to change. The interrogation room felt small, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Heller watched Carter Bell, noting the slight tap of his fingers on the table. A tiny crack in the facade of calm, a telltale sign of nerves. The detectives had laid their groundwork carefully, patiently. They didn't reveal their hand immediately, letting Carter spin his web of denials, letting him believe he was still in control of the narrative. But the weight of Emily Rudd's unearthed remains pressed heavily on the room. The discovery at Blackwood Lake had changed everything, shifting the power dynamic. They had more than just Claire McAllister's inexplicable story now. They had Emily, and they had her bracelet. Heller allowed a moment of silence to stretch, to amplify the tension. Then he placed a small, clear evidence bag on the metal table. Inside, nestled against the sterile plastic, lay the tarnished silver, Emily Rudd's bracelet, with its single, elegant E. Section 2. The Whisper of the Grave, a chilling admission. The silence in the interrogation room was no longer just tense, it was suffocating. Carter Bell stared at the bracelet, his breath catching in his throat. The silver E seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a beacon of accusation. He looked up at Detective Heller, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. The carefully constructed walls of denial were crumbling, brick by brick. He opened his mouth, then closed it, as if words had utterly failed him. The detectives remained silent, allowing the weight of the moment to press down, allowing the reality of his predicament to fully sink in. There was no escape from this, no plausible explanation he could offer. The bracelet, found with Emily's remains, tied him inextricably to her death. Then, a whisper, barely audible, escaped Carter Bell's lips. So low, Heller had to lean forward slightly to catch the words. "She told you, didn't she?" he breathed, his voice raspy with disbelief. It wasn't a question directed at the detectives in a conventional sense. It was a statement of horrified recognition, an acknowledgement of an unearthly power. "She told you." The implication hung heavy in the sterile air. He wasn't referring to a living informant, a witness who had come forward. He was talking about Emily Rudd, the woman he had murdered, the woman whose spirit, it seemed, had reached out from beyond the grave. Section 3. A Promise Kept in Shadows, the Haunting Vow. With the dam of denial broken, the gruesome story spilled forth. Carter Bell, no longer the confident liar, recounted the events of that day. The argument down by Blackwood Lake, the escalating rage, the shove, Emily falling into the cold dark water, his decision, in that moment of panic and fury, not to save her, to watch her struggle, to let the lake claim her. He then described dragging her body from the shallows, burying her hastily, beneath the twisted roots of that ancient silent tree. He had thought his secret was safe, swallowed by the earth, forgotten by time. But he hadn't counted on Emily's enduring presence. As he spoke, his voice trembling, another chilling detail emerged, something Emily had said to him once during a heated argument months before her death. "If anything ever happens to me, Carter," she had warned him, her eyes intense, "if you ever hurt me, I'll come back. I swear it, you'll never rest." He had dismissed it then, the dramatic words of a troubled relationship. He never imagined those words would echo back to him with such terrifying power. Never imagined they would become a literal haunting prophecy, a vow from a woman who, even in death, refused to be silenced. Section 4. When Spirits Seek Justice. The Theory of Vengeful Souls. Carter Bell's confession, prompted by the spectral evidence, was chilling. It validated Claire's terror, and it gave Emily Rudd a voice. But it also opened a door to a realm most would prefer to keep closed. The realm of spirits actively intervening in the world of the living. This is where we encounter the ancient, widespread belief in vengeful spirits. A concept found in folklore and paranormal theories across countless cultures. Known by many names, the Yurei in Japan, the Banshee in Ireland, La Llorona in Hispanic lore. These are not passive echoes of the past, nor benign guiding presences. They are spirits, often of those who died unjustly or violently, who are believed to return with a clear driving purpose, to seek retribution or reveal truth. These vengeful spirits are often characterized by their intense emotional energy, their inability to find peace until their specific mission is accomplished. This mission could be to expose their killer, as in Emily's case, or to ensure that justice denied in life is finally meted out. They might communicate through chosen individuals, like Claire, or manifest in ways that directly impact their tormentors, as Carter clearly felt. The core idea is that a profound injustice creates a spiritual imbalance, an imbalance that the spirit is compelled to rectify. Their actions are not random. They are focused, driven by the circumstances of their demise, and by an unyielding desire for closure, for the scales to be set right. Consider Emily Rudd's actions, as described by Claire and implied by Carter. The specific, accurate information about her name, her killer, her death. The guidance to her hidden grave, the timing of her appearance. These elements align disturbingly well with the profile of a vengeful spirit, a soul so traumatized, so wronged that it cannot move on. Instead it lingers, using its ethereal influence to guide the living, to uncover the crime and ensure the perpetrator faces consequences. Carter's terrified whisper, "She told you, didn't she?" speaks volumes. He didn't just fear the police, he feared Emily, her promise, her spectral power, a power that seemed to have reached out and ensnared him. The implications are profound, unsettling the very foundations of our understanding. If spirits can indeed return to seek justice, what does that mean for the unresolved? Are there other Emilys out there waiting for a Claire to listen, waiting for the right moment to whisper their truth from beyond the veil? The case of Emily Rudd and Carter Bell's confession from beyond suggests so. It paints a picture of a world where the boundary between life and death is permeable, where the dead are not always silent, and where justice can sometimes wear a ghostly face. A chilling thought that some souls will not rest until their story is fully, finally told, and their vengeance, however ethereal, is undeniably achieved. The courtroom's conundrum evidence from an unseen realm. Carter Bell's chilling admission, "She told you, didn't she?" reverberated far beyond the interrogation room. It cast a long, unsettling shadow over the impending legal proceedings. The very foundation of the case against him, while now bolstered by his confession and the discovery of Emily's remains, originated from an impossible source. A ghost's whisper. This presented an unprecedented conundrum for the justice system. How does a court of law, a bastion of verifiable fact and empirical evidence, contend with information ostensibly delivered from the afterlife? The spectral testimony of Emily Rudd, relayed through Claire McAllister, was the genesis of the entire investigation's breakthrough, a truth too bizarre to ignore. The prosecution, led by a seasoned district attorney, faced a delicate balancing act. They knew the jury would hear of Claire's experience. It was intrinsic to the narrative of discovery. However, Their strategy wisely centered on the tangible, irrefutable evidence that Claire's uncanny knowledge had unearthed. Emily Rudd's body, the shallow grave by the twisted tree, the rusted canoe, and crucially, the silver bracelet. Carter Bell's visceral reaction to that bracelet, his subsequent confession detailing the murder, these were the cornerstones of their case. The supernatural element was the spark, but the physical evidence and the killer's own words were the steel trap. They aimed to build a bridge of logic from Claire's strange experience to Carter's guilt. Naturally, Carter Bell's defense attorneys prepared to vigorously attack the prosecution's narrative at its weakest, most unbelievable point: Claire McAllister. They would paint her as unreliable, perhaps delusional, or even a willing participant in some elaborate attention-seeking hoax. They would suggest that she could have gleaned information about Emily Rudd and Carter Bell through conventional, albeit hidden means. Perhaps she had overheard something, read an old obscure news snippet, or been subtly fed details by investigators desperate for a break in a cold case. Their goal was to sow seeds of doubt, to make any testimony connected to a ghostly visitation seem utterly preposterous and inadmissible in a rational court. The courtroom itself became a theater of this fundamental conflict. On one side, the grim, tangible evidence of a brutal murder. On the other, the spectral shadow of how that evidence came to light. Lawyers argued, experts testified, but an undercurrent of unease permeated the proceedings. The legal system is designed to process the known, the provable. Yet here it was, grappling with a truth that seemed to seep in from beyond the veil. The very integrity of the process felt strained by a witness who could not be cross-examined, a voice that echoed from the silence of the grave, challenging the very definitions of evidence and reality. The moment Claire McAllister's story became public, the floodgates of scrutiny opened wide. She was no longer just a terrified witness, she became a phenomenon, a source of endless fascination and fierce debate. The media descended, hungry for every salacious detail of the ghostly confession. Skeptics, and there were many, immediately questioned her motives, her sanity, her very honesty. Was she a clever hoaxer, manipulating a tragic situation for notoriety? Was she an individual suffering from a profound psychological breakdown, her mind conjuring vivid, detailed hallucinations? The public narrative oscillated wildly between portraying her as a conduit for the uncanny and a deeply troubled soul. Experts from various fields eagerly offered their interpretations of Claire's experience. Psychologists proposed theories ranging from dissociative episodes and vivid hypnagogic hallucinations, those that occur on the cusp of sleep, to the power of suggestion, or even cryptomnesia, where forgotten information resurfaces as a seemingly new insight. They spoke of the human mind's capacity to construct elaborate narratives, especially under stress or when exposed to fragments of a compelling story. These explanations sought to ground the extraordinary in the familiar soil of known mental processes, to rationalize what seemed to defy rational thought. They offered comfort to those unsettled by the implications of a genuine ghostly encounter. Yet for every skeptical voice, for every psychological theory, there remained the unwavering, inconvenient truth of the details Claire had provided. How could she have known Emily Rudd's name, or Carter Bell's, when neither had been widely publicized in connection with the disappearance? How could she describe the specific location of the grave, the twisted tree, the rusted canoe, with such pinpoint accuracy if she had never been there? These specifics resisted easy dismissal. They were the hard, sharp edges against which purely psychological explanations often blunted themselves. It was this undeniable specificity that kept the paranormal possibility alive in the minds of many. Throughout this ordeal, Claire McAllister herself remained remarkably consistent, though visibly shaken by the relentless attention. She never sought the spotlight, never embellished her story for dramatic effect. She spoke of her terror, her confusion, and her reluctant sense of duty to Emily's memory. Her fear seemed genuine, her bewilderment profound. She maintained, with a quiet dignity, that her experience was real, that Emily's spirit had indeed appeared to her. The toll of being the messenger, of carrying such an incredible burden, was evident in her weary eyes. She was a woman caught in an extraordinary storm, simply trying to navigate the disorienting waves of belief and disbelief. As the debate between scientific skepticism and supernatural belief raged, another group of experts offered a different lens through which to view Claire McAllister's experience. Parapsychologists, those who study psychical phenomena existing outside the scope of conventional scientific understanding, introduced compelling theories. They suggested that Claire might have experienced a phenomenon known as spontaneous mediumship. This wasn't about darkened seance rooms or practiced clairvoyance. Instead, it described an untrained, ordinary individual who, without warning or intention, suddenly acts as a conduit for communication from a discarnate entity. It was a startling, often frightening, and entirely unbidden transformation. Spontaneous mediumship, as defined by these researchers, posits that certain spirits, particularly those in distress or with an urgent message, might latch on to any receptive individual. The chosen person often has no prior history of psychic abilities, nor any particular belief in the supernatural. Claire McAllister fit this profile perfectly. She was not a spiritualist. She was an everyday woman thrust into an extraordinary circumstance. The spirit of Emily Rudd, desperate for justice, might have perceived a certain sensitivity in Claire, an unconscious openness, making her an unwitting channel for that desperate final plea. The why me question that haunted Claire is central to this theory. The characteristics often associated with spontaneous mediumship aligned remarkably with Claire's chilling account. The experience is typically sudden, overwhelming, and intensely vivid, blurring the lines between the physical world and the spectral intrusion. The information conveyed is often specific, accurate, and previously unknown to the medium, as was the case with Emily's name, Carter's identity, and the details of her demise. There's usually a strong emotional residue, a lingering sense of the spirit's trauma or urgency, which Claire undeniably carried. The spirit's intent, in this instance, to expose a murderer and find her earthly remains, was crystal clear. This differs significantly from individuals who actively cultivate mediumistic abilities through training and practice. Spontaneous mediumship is raw, unfiltered, and often a one-time, life-altering event for the person involved. It's less about a controlled dialogue, and more akin to an emergency broadcast from another dimension, seizing the nearest available receiver. The theory suggests that the veil between worlds, typically perceived as thick and impermeable, can, under certain conditions of extreme spiritual need, become momentarily thin, allowing such desperate communications to break through to an unsuspecting individual. Claire, in this view, became an accidental oracle, chosen by a spirit in its hour of greatest need. Section 4, Where Realities Collide, The Enduring Enigma. The case of Emily Rudd and the ghostly confession that solved her murder inevitably highlighted the enduring chasm between science and the supernatural. Science, by its very nature, demands evidence that is repeatable, observable, and measurable under controlled conditions. It seeks to explain the universe through established laws and principles. The supernatural, conversely, often manifests in singular, unpredictable events, deeply personal experiences that defy easy replication or empirical analysis. Claire McAllister's visitation was a prime example of this collision, a profoundly impactful event that, while leading to verifiable outcomes, stemmed from a source that science struggled to even acknowledge, let alone explain. This stark divide forces us to confront the potential limitations of our current scientific understanding. Are there facets of consciousness, of reality itself, that extend beyond our present capacity to measure or comprehend? The possibility that consciousness might persist after physical death, a cornerstone of many spiritual beliefs and paranormal theories, remains one of humanity's most profound and unresolved questions. Cases like Emily Rudd's, where information seemingly unavailable through normal means leads to tangible discoveries, serve as provocative outliers. They whisper of a reality more complex, more mysterious, than our conventional frameworks might suggest, challenging us to broaden our perspectives. Regardless of one's personal stance on the paranormal, the practical outcome of Claire's experience was undeniable. Carter Bell was brought to justice. Emily Rudd's family received a measure of closure, however painful. The truth, buried for years, was finally unearthed. From a pragmatic viewpoint, did the extraordinary, unexplainable means through which this justice was achieved ultimately matter less than the justice itself? For the detectives who followed the spectral trail, for the prosecutors who secured a conviction, the origin of the initial tip, while bizarre, became secondary to the solid evidence it ultimately produced. The end, in this instance, seemed to validate the unsettling means. Yet, the enigma of Claire McAllister's experience lingers, a haunting echo in the annals of crime. Was she truly a spontaneous medium? An accidental conduit chosen by a restless spirit? Did Emily Rudd's consciousness somehow reach across the ultimate divide to point to her killer? Or is there another explanation, a complex interplay of psychology, coincidence, and unknown human perception that we have yet to unravel? The courtroom sketch depicted the earthly process of justice. The police interview captured the methodical investigation, and the parapsychologist offered a framework for the inexplicable. But the full truth, perhaps, resides in that liminal space where these different realities collide, forever inviting us to question the boundaries of what we believe is possible. The wheels of justice, once set in motion by an ethereal whisper, turned inexorably towards their conclusion. Carter Bell faced the court, his confident facade long since shattered. The evidence, unearthed by a ghost's guidance and cemented by his own chilling confession, was overwhelming. There was little room for doubt, little space for legal maneuvering. The jury listened, their faces etched with a mixture of horror and disbelief at the tale that had unfolded. The sentence, when it finally came, was severe: 35 years to life in prison. For the murder of Emily Rudd, a life cut short by rage and deceit, Carter Bell would pay with his own freedom, a stark reckoning for a crime he thought forever buried. For Emily Rudd's family, the verdict brought a complex wave of emotions. There was a grim satisfaction, a sense that justice, however delayed, had finally been served, but there was no joy, only a profound and enduring sorrow. Soon after, they gathered under a somber sky to lay Emily to rest, truly rest at last. The funeral was a quiet affair, heavy with the weight of years of uncertainty and grief. The discovery of her remains, the confirmation of her fate, had been a brutal reopening of wounds. Yet it also offered a strange, sorrowful peace. They could now mourn her properly, visit her grave, and begin the slow, painful process of finding a new kind of normal without her. The town of Blackwood, once rocked by Emily's disappearance and then by the bizarre revelation of her ghostly confession, slowly began to absorb the story's final chapters. Whispers still circulated, of course. The tale was too strange, too unsettling to be easily forgotten. It had become a local legend, a chilling reminder of the darkness that could lie beneath a placid surface. For some, it was a macabre curiosity. For others, it was a disturbing testament to things unseen, to forces beyond their comprehension. The community grappled with the uncomfortable truth that the rational world they knew had been breached by something inexplicable, something profoundly mysterious. The conviction of Carter Bell closed a painful chapter, a cold case finally solved. For Emily's family, it was an ending, a period placed at the end of a long, agonizing sentence of not knowing. But for others, for those who had followed the case with a sense of wonder or unease, it felt like something else. It felt like the beginning of a dawning awareness. An awareness that truth can wear many faces, and that justice sometimes finds its voice in the most unexpected, even impossible, of messengers. The legal system had its closure, but the questions raised by Emily's ghostly intervention lingered, hanging heavy in the air, long after the courtroom doors had closed. Claire McAllister, the reluctant conduit for Emily Rudd's spectral plea, found herself at the center of a storm she had never sought. The trial, the media attention, the endless questions, it was an overwhelming burden. Her ordinary life had been irrevocably altered, touched by an experience that few could comprehend and many openly doubted. She had faced skepticism, ridicule, and an intrusive curiosity that stripped away her privacy. All she had wanted was to deliver a message to help a tormented spirit find peace. With Carter Bell sentenced and Emily laid to rest, Claire sought her own peace, a quiet retreat from the relentless glare. She decided to leave town. Before she disappeared from public view, she sent one final poignant message. It was not addressed to the press, nor to the skeptics or believers. It felt more like a quiet reflection, a whisper to the universe itself. "I don't know why she chose me," Claire wrote, her words carrying the weight of her extraordinary journey. "But I hope she's at peace, and if someone else needs help, I'm still listening." This last sentence, simple yet profound, resonated with a chilling implication. It suggested that her experience was not necessarily a closed chapter, but perhaps an opening, a new, unsettling awareness within her. Claire was no longer the unassuming woman she had been before that fateful November night. The terror of Emily's visitation, the burden of the secret, the unnerving accuracy of the ghost's information, these had changed her. She had glimpsed something beyond the veil of ordinary perception, something that had chosen her as its instrument. This knowledge was a heavy cloak to wear. Her final message hinted at an acceptance of this new strange role, a reluctant willingness to remain open, should another desperate voice reach out from the silence. It was a vow made not in confidence but with a sense of solemn, perhaps even fearful duty. The image of Claire, as described in some accounts, standing alone at the edge of Emily's cemetery, is a powerful one. A solitary figure caught between the world of the living and the lingering echoes of the dead. She had become a bridge, unwittingly, between two realms. Her departure from Blackwood was not just a physical move, it was an attempt to reclaim a semblance of normalcy. But one couldn't help but wonder if normalcy was ever truly possible again, for someone who had heard a ghost confess to murder, and who, with a shiver of trepidation, had declared herself still listening for more. Claire McAllister's haunting question, "I don't know why she chose me," resonates deeply with another paranormal concept. This is the theory of the thin veil. It's the belief that the perceived boundary separating our world from the realm of spirits is not always a fixed, impenetrable wall. Instead, it can be more like a delicate fabric, a veil that, under certain conditions, can become thin, almost transparent. In these moments, or in particular places, the separation between the living and the dead may weaken, allowing for communication, for visitations, for whispers to pass through from the other side. It's a deeply ancient idea, found in cultures across the globe. How might this theory illuminate Claire's extraordinary experience? Perhaps the intense emotional distress of Emily Rudd at the moment of her violent death, or her lingering desperation for justice, created a powerful spiritual energy. This energy, according to the theory, could have thinned the veil in her vicinity, or even allowed her to project her consciousness across it. Alternatively, perhaps Claire herself unknowingly possessed a latent sensitivity, an openness that made her more receptive when Emily's spirit desperately sought a conduit. It could have been a confluence of factors. Emily's urgent need meeting Claire's unconscious receptivity at a moment when the veil was unusually permeable. The conditions that might lead to a thinning of the veil are varied and debated. Intense emotional states such as profound grief, terror, or a desperate longing for contact are often cited. Traumatic events, particularly sudden and violent deaths, are believed to leave strong psychic imprints, creating areas where the veil is weaker. Some also suggest that certain individuals, perhaps through their inherent nature or specific spiritual practices, are more attuned to these subtle shifts in the fabric of reality. It's not necessarily about a specific place being haunted, but rather a specific moment or connection where the boundary momentarily gives way. In Emily Rudd's case, her spirit, in its overwhelming need to expose her killer and find her resting place, might have actively sought out a tear in this veil. Or perhaps her sheer desperation itself was the force that momentarily thinned it, allowing her spectral image and her chilling message to break through to Claire. Claire, sleeping soundly in her bed in the quiet stillness of 3:17 a.m., may have been in a state of mind, perhaps on the edge of dreaming, that was particularly open to such an ethereal intrusion. The thin veil theory offers a framework for understanding how such an impossible communication might, just might, have occurred. The story of Emily Rudd and Claire McAllister leaves us with a cascade of unanswered questions, a lingering echo of the inexplicable. Was Claire truly chosen by Emily's spirit, a specific selection from beyond the grave? Or was she, as the case's outro slide might suggest, simply in the right place, or perhaps the wrong place, at the right time? A random receiver for a desperate signal broadcast into the void. The distinction is subtle but profound, influencing how we perceive the agency of spirits and the nature of such otherworldly encounters. The truth, like a phantom, remains elusive, just beyond our grasp. If the veil between worlds can indeed thin, if spirits can reach across the divide, it begs a larger, more unsettling question. Are there other Emily Rudds out there, other souls trapped in silence, desperate to communicate their truths? Are there whispers constantly around us, unheard because we are not receptive, because our own veils are too thick with the noise of the living world, or perhaps because we simply choose not to listen, dismissing the subtle signs, the fleeting sensations, as mere tricks of the mind? The possibility is a sobering one, suggesting a world far more populated with unheard stories than we might imagine. Claire's final haunting words, "I'm still listening," take on an even greater significance in this context. They are not just a personal reflection, they become a quiet challenge, an open invitation. What if others do need help? What if other spectral pleas are waiting for a receptive ear? Her statement transforms her from a passive recipient of a ghostly message into an active, albeit reluctant, sentinel at the border of the known. It's a heavy responsibility, a path she never chose but now seems unable to entirely forsake. Her life, forever changed, now carries the potential for further encounters, further journeys into the unsettling unknown. This unfinished story, the tale of the ghost that confessed to murder, ultimately reminds us that perhaps the dead are not always done with us. Maybe some souls truly don't rest until they are heard, until their justice is found, until their peace is made. And maybe, just maybe, the boundary is thinner than we think, the whispers more frequent, the echoes more persistent. The mystery endures, a gentle piano fading into an ethereal synth, leaving us to ponder the profound, silent connections that might just bind all worlds together. The final note hangs in the air, a question mark suspended in the quiet darkness. Thank you for watching till the end. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel Crime Files Unlocked for more chilling stories. See you next time.